secret to becoming a confident English speaker isn't learning more words, but actually doing less. We're breaking the addiction to constant stimulation to discover how intentional silence and mindful speaking can unlock a higher level of communication. It is time to pause, reset, and achieve success through simplicity. Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive into communication, language psychology, and personal growth. I'm Zinni, and sitting right across from me is my co-host and partner in linguistic exploration, Frank. Today, Frank, we are tackling something that I think is going to turn a lot of conventional language learning wisdom completely on its head.
Thanks, Zinni. I am incredibly excited about this episode because it addresses a pain point that almost every single English learner and honestly almost every modern communicator faces today. We live in a world of absolute noise. We are told to consume more, study more, memorize more vocabulary lists, and speak faster. But what if all that hyperstimulation is actually the very thing blocking your fluency? Today, we are exploring the concept of the dopamine fast, specifically tailored for English conversation practice and mindful communication. It's a radical idea, but the results speak for themselves.
It really is a crisis, Frank. Let's look at the typical journey of someone trying to achieve advanced English fluency. They download 5 different vocabulary apps, they watch hours of English videos at 1.5 times speed, they have flashcards open while they eat breakfast, and they listen to podcasts while they answer work emails. They are flooded with data. Yet the moment they sit down in a meeting or step into a social gathering where they have to speak English, their mind goes completely blank. They freeze. Why does that happen? It's because their brains are completely fried by a constant, unrelenting drip of dopamine.
Exactly. Let's break down what dopamine actually does in the context of learning. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter of anticipation, desire, and reward. It's the chemical that fires when you scroll through social media or when you get a notification that you successfully completed a 2-minute matching game on a language app. It feels like progress. Your brain says, "Oh, look, you matched 10 words today. Here's a little splash of joy." But that is a cheap, superficial form of stimulation. It doesn't translate to real-world neural connections required for spontaneous, deep conversation. When you are addicted to that constant input, your brain loses its tolerance for the natural gaps, pauses, and quiet spaces that real human conversation requires.
That is the exact loop. I call it the input trap. Learners become addicted to the feeling of studying rather than the act of communication. When you are constantly consuming English input without intentional, quiet processing time, your brain never moves that information from your short-term working memory into your long-term accessible storage. Think about it like a physical warehouse. If delivery trucks keep backing up to the loading dock and dumping boxes of words, idioms, and grammar rules every single minute, but you never give the warehouse workers a quiet shift to organize the shelves, what happens? The next time you need to find a specific tool, a specific phrase or word, you can't find it under the massive pile of unorganized clutter.
That warehouse analogy is perfect, Zinni, and what's worse is the anxiety this clutter creates. When a non-native English speaker enters a live conversation, they feel an immense pressure to perform instantly. Because their brain is accustomed to high-speed digital inputs, they believe they have to produce outputs at that same frantic machine gun pace. They think, if I pause for even 1 second, I am failing. If there is a silence, it means my English is bad. So what do? They fill the silence with filler words like, like, you know, or they start rambling, losing their point entirely. They are chasing the dopamine hit of continuous vocalization because silence feels like a terrifying void.
It really does feel terrifying to many. But here is the reality check. True eloquence and true confidence do not sound like a runaway train. Look at the most powerful speakers in history, whether they are native or non-native. They don't rush. They don't panic when there is a moment of stillness. In fact, they use stillness as a weapon of precision. That is why we are advocating for a dopamine fast for mindful speaking. We need to train our brains to tolerate and eventually cherish the space between the words.
Let's define exactly what we mean by this, because when people hear dopamine fast or dopamine detox, they might think we are suggesting they go live in a cave in the mountains and never look at an English book again. That's not it at all. In the context of English conversation practice, a dopamine fast means intentionally stripping away the hyper-stimulating, low-effort habits that condition your brain to expect instant gratification. It means transitioning from reactive consumption to intentional creation.
I want to dive deeper into this addiction to words. I see so many advanced English learners who have an active vocabulary of thousands of words. They know advanced literary terms, complex idioms, and jargon. Yet their communication is clunky, exhausting to listen to, and ineffective. They are suffering from what I call verbal obesity. They believe that more is always better.
Verbal obesity. That is a harsh but brilliant way to put it, Zinni. It's the idea that if I just throw enough words at the wall, some of them will stick and I will look smart or fluent. But true communication isn't about showing off your vocabulary. It's about transferring an idea from your mind to the listener's mind with the least amount of friction possible. When you are addicted to high stimulation, your thoughts are fragmented. Therefore, your speech becomes fragmented. You use 20 words to say something that could be beautifully expressed in 5. A golden rule of communication. Fluency is not measured by how many words you can pack into a single breath. It is measured by how much value and clarity you can deliver in a single thought.
Let's demonstrate this right now, Frank. Let's do a quick contrast exercise so our listeners can hear the difference. Let's say a speaker wants to explain that they had a very busy and productive day at work, but they feel tired. A hyper-stimulated speaker, desperate to use every advanced word they just memorized on their app, might say something like this. Today, honestly, my schedule was incredibly, heavily congested and inundated with copious amounts of obligatory corporate assignments and tasks, And so, subsequently, at this current juncture, I am experiencing an absolute state of profound physiological and psychological exhaustion, totally drained.
Wow, I felt exhausted just listening to that, Zinni. It feels like you were trying to sprint through a swamp. Now, let's look at how a mindful, dopamine-fasted speaker would approach the exact same thought. They aren't panicked by pauses. They aren't trying to impress anyone with a thesaurus. They take a breath, anchor themselves, and say, "Today was incredibly demanding. We accomplished a lot, but I'm completely out of energy."
Hear the difference, everyone. The second version has a punch. It has weight. It allows the listener to actually feel the weight of the day. The pauses between demanding, accomplished, and energy allow the meaning to settle. The first version was just noise chasing a validation hit. The second version is pure, unadulterated communication. That is the power of doing less.
All right, let's get highly practical. Our listeners are nodding along, but they want to know, how do I actually implement this dopamine fast into my daily English conversation practice? Let's lay down a structured blueprint that anyone can start today. Step number 1 is what I call the digital sanctuary protocol.
This step is all about environmental control. Before you do any English practice, whether it's reading aloud, journaling, or practicing speaking into a recorder, you must eliminate all digital microstimuli. Turn your phone completely off or put it in another room. No exceptions. Close every single tab on your computer except the one document or audio track you are working with. Clear your desk of everything except a notebook and a pen. You need to signal to your brain that for the next 20 minutes, there is no escape hatch. There is no alternative window to click on when you hit a difficult sentence. You are forcing your brain to sit the language.
Once you've cleared the environment, you apply this rule to your actual speaking mechanics. Whenever you are asked a question in English, or whenever you are practicing answering a prompt by yourself, you must force yourself to wait a full 3 seconds before your lips move. During those 3 seconds, you do not panic. You do not look up at the ceiling and scramble for words. You breathe in, you settle your focus, and you formulate the core spine of your sentence. This completely breaks the habit of impulsive, anxious, reactive speaking.
I can hear some people panicking right now just thinking about a 3-second silence in a real conversation. They are thinking, Zinni, if I stop speaking for 3 seconds in a meeting, my boss will think I don't know the answer. But let me tell you a secret about corporate psychology. The person who pauses before they speak is almost always perceived as the most powerful, authoritative, and thoughtful person in the room. A panicked, immediate response signals submission and anxiety. A measured, delayed response signals confidence and strategic thinking.
Step 3 is about changing what you practice with. Instead of scrolling through 50 different news headlines or reading 10 different short social media posts in English, pick one single article, one paragraph, or one idea. Spend 20 minutes exploring that single topic deeply. Read it slowly. Analyze why the author used a specific verb instead of another. Speak out loud about that single topic for 5 minutes straight without changing the subject. This trains your brain to sustain its focus and build a deep, contextual web of language, rather than a shallow, fragmented one.
This is a fantastic exercise for breaking the perfectionism loop, which is another dopamine-seeking behavior. A lot of learners speak a sentence, realize they made a minor grammatical mistake, immediately stop, correct themselves, and try again. They are seeking the reward of a perfect sentence. In the monitored monologue, you set a timer for 3 minutes. You pick a topic and you speak continuously. The only rule, you are absolutely forbidden from correcting yourself. If you say he goes to the store instead of he goes, you must keep moving forward. You must learn to tolerate the discomfort of imperfection. This breaks the hyper-reactive loop and builds real, sustained conversational momentum.
Let's spend some time talking about this fear of silence, because it really is the anchor holding so many people back. In Western communication culture particularly, there is a hyper-focus on rapid turn-taking. People interrupt each other, they finish each other's sentences. It can feel like a verbal basketball game where everyone is wrestling for the ball. If you are a non-native speaker trying to play that game at that exact tempo, you will always feel at a disadvantage. But you don't have to play that game. You can change the tempo of the entire room simply by mastering what I call conversational stillness.
Oh, I love that term, Frank. Conversational stillness. Tell our listeners what that actually looks like in action.
It looks like this. When someone finishes speaking to you, instead of immediately rushing to fill the void, you let their last words hang in the air for a brief moment. You acknowledge their statement with a nod, showing that you have fully digested what they said, rather than just waiting for your turn to speak. Then, when you speak, you lower the pitch of your voice slightly, and you speak at a pace that allows for natural gaps between your clauses. For example, notice how I am speaking right now. I am not rushing. I am letting my ideas land. When you do this, you notice something magical happens. The other person instantly slows down to match your tempo. You gain control of the conversational rhythm.
It's completely contagious, isn't it? If someone comes at you with high, anxious energy, and you meet them with that same high, anxious energy, the conversation quickly degrades into a messy, unproductive verbal collision. But if you hold your ground in calmness, they will almost always decelerate to meet you. This is incredibly liberating for English learners. It means you don't need to match the native speaker's speed to be considered fluent. You just need to own your pace.
To a foundational paradigm shift. To truly achieve success through simplicity, you have to transition from a mindset of continuous acquisition to a mindset of consolidation and mastery. Think about martial arts. A master doesn't win a fight by knowing 10,000 different moves and executing them all frantically at the same time. A master wins by knowing a few fundamental movements so deeply, so purely, that they can execute them with absolute precision, minimal effort, and zero wasted energy.
That is exactly how we should look at our English usage. Let's look at the actual structural elements of English that benefit from this mindful consolidation. Instead of trying to master every single advanced conditional or obscure tense, let's master the simplicity of the active voice, the power of strong verbs, and the beauty of short, clean declarations. Let's look at a comparative breakdown of how we can clean up our language structures through simplicity.
Look at how much cleaner and more confident the mindful versions sound. The wordy versions look like someone who is hiding behind vocabulary because they are afraid of being direct, or because their mind is operating at a hyper-stimulated, unfocused frequency. The simple versions show absolute clarity of thought. They require a brain that is calm, centered, and completely detached from the need to perform or show off.
And think about the cognitive load you save when you speak like this. When you are trying to construct those long, convoluted, overcomplicated sentences, your brain is working in overdrive. It's calculating grammar formulas, checking word agreements, and worrying about syntax errors. No wonder you get tired after 10 minutes of speaking English. No wonder your brain shuts down. When you embrace simplicity, you reduce your cognitive load by half. You leave your brain with plenty of reserve energy to focus on what matters most: connection, emotional intelligence, and actual listening.
Let's talk about that word you just used, listening. We often forget that conversation is a two-way street. It's an ecosystem. 50%, if not more, of conversation is listening. But when your brain is addicted to high stimulation and dopamine loops, you aren't actually listening to the other person when they speak. What are you doing instead? You are using that time to frantically rehearse what you are going to say next.
Oh, absolutely. You see their lips moving, but inside your head, you're running a script. Okay, when he finishes, I'm going to use that new idiom I learned. How did it go again? Hit the nail on the head. Okay, I'll say that. Wait, what did he just say? Uh-oh, I missed it. By the time they stop speaking, you are completely out of sync with the reality of the moment. You throw out your rehearsed line and it lands completely flat because it doesn't align with the emotional subtext of what they just said.
That is the death of real connection. A mindful speaking practice requires a commitment to mindful listening. When the other person is speaking, you perform an internal dopamine fast on your own thoughts. You silence your internal scriptwriter. You give them 100% of your current presence. You listen not just to their words, but to their tone, their pauses, and their intent. And because you are practicing the 3-second structural pause rule we discussed earlier, you don't need to have an answer ready the moment they stop. You can comfortably wait until they are finished, take your 3 seconds to process, and then respond authentically to what was actually said, not what you imagined would be said.
Let's bring this to life with some real-world application scenarios. Let's look at 3 distinct environments where advanced English learners struggle the most: the job interview, the high-stakes business meeting, and the casual networking event. Let's see how a hyper-stimulated approach fails and how a mindful, dopamine-fasted approach wins.
Imagine you are interviewing for a senior role at an international company. The interviewer looks at you and asks a tough behavioral question. Tell me about a time you failed and how you handled it. The hyper-stimulated approach, the candidate's heart rate spikes, their brain demands an immediate answer to alleviate the anxiety of the silence. They start speaking instantly without a clear plan. They ramble through a confusing story, jumping back and forth between timelines, using filler words, trying to throw in buzzwords like synergy, agile, and paradigm shift. They speak for 4 minutes straight without stopping, lose their train of thought, and end awkwardly with, so that's basically it. The interviewer is left confused and unimpressed. The mindful, dopamine-fasted approach, the candidate hears the question. They consciously hold eye contact, nod slowly, and take a deep, silent breath. They wait a full 3 seconds. The room is quiet, but the candidate looks completely collected. Then they speak with measured precision. They use the STAR method: situation, task, action, result, but in a stripped-down, clear manner. They say, 2 years ago, we missed a critical product launch deadline. The failure was due to misaligned expectations within my team. I took responsibility by doing 2 things. They speak for 2 minutes, using simple but impactful language, leaving deliberate pauses between their key points. They conclude firmly. The interviewer perceives them as a mature, structured leader who remains calm under pressure.
Now let's look at a business meeting where you need to present an idea or defend a proposal against criticism from a colleague. A hyper-stimulated approach, a colleague questions your data. Your brain treats this as an immediate threat. Your dopamine-starved hyperreactive system triggers a defensive response. You interrupt your colleague mid-sentence to justify your position. You speak rapidly, trying to overwhelm them with an avalanche of explanation, details, descriptive justifications. You over-explain, which ironically makes your data look even more suspicious and unstable. You leave the room feeling exhausted and disconnected from your team.
The mindful approach. Your colleague questions your data. You listen intently without interrupting. You allow a full second of silence after they finish speaking to show you aren't threatened. Then you say calmly, "That's a valid point. Let's look at the core metric behind that number." You state your point clearly, use minimal words, and then stop speaking. You don't over-explain. You let your statement stand on its own strength. The room respects your composure, and the focus shifts immediately back to solving the problem rather than managing personal egos.
The mindful approach. The learner enters the circle with zero pressure to be the loudest or fastest talker. They practice active, mindful listening. They laugh when others laugh, fully present in the moment. When they choose to speak, they don't try to tell a long, rapid-fire story. They ask a deep, thoughtful, open-ended question, or share a brief, concise observation. Because they aren't trying to perform, their energy is relaxed and grounded. People naturally gravitate toward them because they are an exceptional listener and a refreshing, non-anxious presence in a room full of loud talkers everywhere.
It becomes so obvious when you look at these scenarios side by side. Simplicity isn't just a stylistic preference, it is a profound competitive advantage. It becomes so obvious when you look at these scenarios side by side. Simplicity isn't just a stylistic preference, it is a profound competitive advantage. Frank, let's dig a bit into the cognitive science behind why our brains crave simplicity when processing language, both as the speaker and as the listeners.
This is where the concept of cognitive load theory comes into play. Our brains have a limited amount of working memory capability at any given moment. Think of it like the RAM on your computer. When someone speaks to you in a foreign language, or when you are trying to produce a foreign language, your brain's RAM is handling multiple parallel processes. When you are in a hyper-stimulated state, your extraneous load is through the roof because of performance anxiety and constant environmental distractions. If you then choose to use complex, convoluted sentence structures, you drive your intrinsic load through the roof as well. The system crashes. You run out of processing power, and that's when your mind goes completely blank.
Right! By implementing a dopamine fast and choosing simplicity, you drastically lower both the extraneous load by calming your nervous system and embracing silence, and the intrinsic load by choosing simple, clear linguistic structures. This frees up almost all of your cognitive RAM for germane load, which is the actual processing of deep meaning, genuine expression, and human connection. It is pure cognitive economics. You are investing your limited mental energy where it yields the highest return.
Let's turn this episode into a transformational experience for our audience. We want to challenge every single person listening to this right now to engage in a 7-day mindful speaking dopamine fast. Spite, let's map this out day by day so they have an exact roadmap to follow. Cut your English consumption input by 50%. No scrolling through short-form English content, no mindless background videos. If you listen to English today, you listen to one single long-form piece of content, like a high-quality interview or this podcast, with 100% focused, undivided attention for 15 minutes, no multitasking, no phones in your hand. Today is all about the pause. Every time you have to speak English, whether it's answering an automated system on the phone, talking to a colleague, or practicing by yourself, you must explicitly count to 3 in your head before you speak. Focus on the feeling of calmness that exists within that 3-second window. Today, your goal is structural minimalism. You are forbidden from using sentences that contain more than 15 words. If you have a complex thought, you must break it down into 2 or 3 short, distinct, punchy sentences. Notice how this forces you to select your words with deliberate intention. Spend at least 10 minutes sitting in total silence before you do any English practice. No music, no background noise, no thoughts about work. Just sit, breathe, and ground your nervous system. Then open your journal and write down 5 clear, simple thoughts in English about your day. Speak those 5 thoughts out loud, slowly, letting each one breathe. Today, you are going to practice speaking without safety nets. Pick a topic and talk about it out loud for 3 minutes. If you forget a specific advanced word, you are not allowed to stop or look it up on a translation app. Instead, you must practice circumlocution, describing the concept using simple words that you already know. Train your brain to find alternative paths through simplicity. Set a timer for 5 minutes. Choose a complex topic, say for example, how technology is changing our relationships. Speak continuously for 5 minutes without a single self-correction. If you make a grammar mistake, let it go immediately. Focus entirely on the flow, the rhythm, and maintaining a calm, unhurried physical demeanor. Bring it all together in a real-world interaction or a long-form recorded monologue. Combine the digital silence, the 3-second pause, structural simplicity, and mindful listening. Record yourself if possible and listen back to it, not to critique your grammar, but to evaluate your presence and the weight of your delivery.
You commit to these 7 days, what you are actually doing is undergoing a profound psychological shift. You are moving from a performance mindset to a connection mindset. When you have a performance mindset, every English conversation is a test. It's an exam where you are graded on your vocabulary choice, your accent speed, and your grammatical precision. That mindset is inherently highly anxious, and it constantly seeks the dopamine reward of external validation. Someone saying, "Oh, your English is amazing."
And the problem with chasing that validation is that it puts all your power into someone else's hands. It keeps your nervous system in a permanent state of vulnerability. But when you transition to a connection mindset through this dopamine fast, you realize that your English is not a performance art piece. It is simply a tool for connection. You stop caring about looking smart. You start caring about being understood. You stop trying to dazzle people with your vocabulary, and you start inviting them into a clean, peaceful space of mutual clarity.
That quote perfectly captures the essence of everything we're talking about today, Frank. Simplicity is not primitive. It is not basic. It is not low level. True simplicity is the highest form of mastery. It is the result of a profound internal filtering process. It takes immense confidence to stand before someone and use a few simple, well-chosen words separated by deliberate moments of silence. That is where real communication authority lives. Let's spend our remaining time addressing some objections and questions that often come up when we share this mindful framework with our advanced coaching clients. One of the most frequent questions I get is, "Frank, what if I pause for 3 seconds and the other person interrupts me before I even start talking because they think I have nothing to say?" That is an excellent, highly practical concern. My answer to that is all about nonverbal signaling. Silence is only perceived as a lack of knowledge if your body language signals defeat. If you look down at the floor, slump your shoulders, and look panicked during those 3 seconds, yes, the other person will likely jump in because they think you are drowning and they want to save you, or because they want to take over.
But if you maintain steady, comfortable eye contact, keep an open posture, and perhaps raise a hand slightly in a relaxed gesture or simply nod thoughtfully, you are non-verbally signaling, I am processing this deeply and I am about to deliver a high-value response. That nonverbal signature creates an invisible barrier that holds your space for you. Try it, and you will be amazed at how effectively it commands respect.
Another question that comes up all the time is, if I stop consuming all these vocabulary apps and high-speed English media, won't my vocabulary start shrinking? Won't I forget the words I already learned?
This is where we need to understand the difference between active vocabulary and passive vocabulary. Most advanced learners have an enormous passive vocabulary, words they understand perfectly when they read or hear them, but can't access when speaking. The reason they can't access them isn't because they need more input. It's because they haven't built the calm, stable neural pathways required to pull those words from their passive memory into their active speech. By executing a dopamine fast and slowing down your output pace, you finally give your brain the space it needs to pull those deep, passive words forward. You don't need new words. You need to unlock and master the words you already have stored away in the dusty corners of your mental warehouse.
That makes total sense. You're essentially converting latent potential energy into active kinetic energy. You are optimizing your current resources instead of constantly hoarding more resources you can't use. Let's address one final question. I work in an incredibly fast-paced corporate environment where everyone yells, talks over each other, and speaks at 1,000,000 miles an hour. How can I possibly apply this mindful approach without being left behind entirely?
This is definitely a challenge, but it's also your greatest opportunity. In an environment where everyone is screaming, the person who speaks softly and clearly is the one everyone stops to listen to. If you try to join the screaming match at their speed, you are fighting an uphill battle, especially as a non-native speaker. Instead of trying to win the race of speed, win the race of density and clarity. Let them ramble for 10 minutes. Let them argue at high velocity. Listen intently, look for the core flaw or the core solution in their chaotic arguments, wait for a natural break in the noise, anchor yourself, apply your pause, and then deliver a highly concentrated, crystal clear summary statement that cuts right through the noise. Be the person who speaks less but says more. When you become that anchor of clarity in a sea of corporate chaos, your value skyrockets. You become indispensable.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation, Zinni. It really shows that becoming an exceptional, confident English speaker isn't about running faster on the content consumption treadmill. It's about having the courage to step off the treadmill entirely, take a breath, and embrace the power of intentional silence and strategic simplicity.
Absolutely, Frank. To everyone listening out there, your English is not broken. Your mind is simply overstimulated. Give yourself permission to do less. Try the 7-day Mindful Speaking Dopamine Fast Challenge. Clear out the digital noise, embrace the 3-second pause, choose short and powerful sentences, and speak from a place of grounded presence. You don't need to learn more words to be a master communicator. You simply need to let the words you already have be heard. Thank you for joining us on this journey toward mindful communication success. Until next time, take a breath, step into the stillness, and speak with impact.
See you next time, everyone.